do have in the same section in the Babylonian room of the museum this Nabonidus cylinder. It should be there. I've called it tablet, but it should be a cylinder. And this is a remarkable thing because it seemed like the writer of Daniel makes an error in the same way that Isaiah did. Daniel talks about the fall of Babylon, and it's being overtaken by the Persian kingdom under King Cyrus, and that's all described for us in Daniel chapter 5, which is the famous story of Belshazzar's feast. And again, no time for detail in this presentation, but historians were extremely skeptical about this because we know that actually the last king of Babylon, when Babylon fell, was a guy called Nabonidus. Daniel seems insistent that he's dealing with a king called Belshazzar or something of that kind in the original language. And so for a long time this was thought to be something of a conflict. We also read in Daniel that Belshazzar was captured by Cyrus and put to death, whereas we know from history that when Cyrus attacked Babylon, he captured Nabonidus, but he didn't put him to death. He banished him, and so there are these awkward details that are not quite coming together. And so there was skepticism about Daniel. Again, it's a book full of prophetic material which would be undermined if the historical material turned out to be in error. And so therefore we had somehow dealt with the problem of Daniel's prophecies until in the late 1800s, our times, an archaeologist by the name of Taylor was working on the ziggurat at the city of Ur. It was a stepped temple just outside the city of Ur, and it was the temple of the moon god. And in that temple he found 4 of these little cylinders buried, one in each corner, something like that. And when these cylinders were found and translated, cuneiform text, so it could be read, when it was translated, we realized quite shockingly that Daniel had been telling us something that only someone present at the time would have known. The last king of Babylon was definitely a king named Nabonidus. There's no question about that. But what we didn't know in those early stages of history was that he was hugely unpopular at home. The people hated him. And in order to avoid the constant conflict between him and his people, he would go off on grand expeditions. And at one point he disappeared for 10 years on some great expedition. During that time he went down to where the temple of his god, the moon god, was, and it was dilapidated and ruined, and so he stayed there for ages, rebuilding it, doing it up, making it nice for his god, trying desperately, I guess, to earn moon god credits. And then he has a problem, of course. In those days gods were very local and parochial, so maybe God, the moon god, doesn't stay in a dilapidated temple. And so you solve the problem by leaving God a note so that God knows it was you who did all these good things, and then he would read the note and give you the credits that you needed. And so the note, I'm parodying a little, but it says something like, "Dear moon god, while you're out I did the place up," and talks about his various exploits and so on. But then quite incidentally he refers to, and this is the first time that the name comes to us after Daniel's reference in the book of Daniel chapter 5. For the first time in 2,500 years, Nabonidus tells us that his son Belshazzar is looking after the kingdom while he's gone. And that was a striking, jaw-dropping moment, really, because it tells us that only someone who was present at the time would actually know that Belshazzar was the regent acting on behalf of the king. Unfortunately for Nabonidus, accident prone I think that he was, he returned to Babylon just as it fell to the Medo-Persian Empire. Cyrus took over and put a Darius in place to take care of the kingdom while he took care of bigger matters.